We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace.
And we will fight our wars against poverty, ignorance, and injustice. Our commitment to human rights must be absolute. The passion for freedom is on the rise.
Growing up in Plains, Georgia, Jimmy Carter was truly a product of his parents.
His mother represented a very tender heart. His father represented a very tough mind. You've got to have a tough mind and a tender heart. And I think Jimmy Carter was born that way.
My father was a dedicated, hard-working, down-to-earth farmer, and he was a strict racial segregationist. My mother, on the other hand, believed just the opposite. She was a registered nurse, and she treated black and white people exactly the same. This was a kind of torment or division in my life. All my neighbors, all my playmates, all my intimate companions were African-American kids. We went to separate schools, went to separate churches, so that's the way I grew up. Miss Judy Coleman was our superintendent, and she convinced me that I could do anything I wanted to. At that time, my only ambition was to go to the Naval Academy because I had a favorite uncle who was in the Navy.
At age 17, Jimmy received his appointment to the academy, becoming the first Carter to leave Georgia to pursue higher education. In 1945, on a trip home from the academy, Jimmy ran into a friend of one of his sisters from Plains named Rosalind Smith. By the end of their first date, Carter was smitten. 1 year later, they were married.
The highest ambition that a young naval officer could have was to go into the submarine force. And when I went to work for Rickover, he was extremely demanding on me. I soon learned that he would be the greatest influence on my life of any man except my own daddy, my own father.
With a coveted position in the Navy, Lieutenant Carter's life course seemed set. But in 1953, Earl Carter was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
All the time I was there were streams of visitors who came to our house in Plains. And they would regale me with these accounts of the things that my daddy had done to improve their lives that were totally secret.
He came back and said, I could do more in Plains, Georgia than I could to help people than I could ever do in the Navy.
And to my utter amazement, I began to think that I should follow my father's footsteps rather than to continue with my Navy career. When I came home, I had no interest in politics. But the #1 gubernatorial candidate, his slogan was he would hold up one finger and say, "No, not one," promising that he would shut down all the public schools in Georgia if one black child entered a white classroom. And I decided that I would try to do what I could to prevent that happening.
Carter carried his cause to the political stage and ran for state senate. When a local corrupt politician rigged the results, Carter refused to concede.
This experience taught me a lot of things about politics and government. First of all, I saw the horrible lack of honesty and integrity in the basic election laws of my own state. I also saw that to challenge this status quo was possible if one was tenacious in trying to bring about a seminal change.
Carter's pursuit for justice prevailed, and he took his seat in the Georgia State Senate. After 2 terms in the state senate, Jimmy set his sights on the governorship. He lost his first bid in 1966, but came back fighting in 1970 and won.
Jimmy Carter, 9,000 votes. Hal Sue, 4,000 votes.
On his first day in office, Governor Carter called upon all Georgians to choose a new direction.
I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
We had had the horrible, divisive Vietnam War. We had had all the scandals with Watergate. I think who Jimmy Carter was and is sort of fit that thing that people were looking for.
We always thought he could win. I mean, we never doubted it. And we all campaigned, our whole family went in different directions.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
Jimmy Carter and incumbent Gerald Ford were in a close race up to the final days of the election.
NBC News projects James Earl Carter of the state of Georgia elected the next president of the United States.
On day one, the new president faced the ambitious promise he made on a campaign trail, setting America on a new course.
Looming energy shortages confront the United States with a crisis as serious as war.
We simply must balance our demand for energy with our rapidly shrinking resources. By acting now, we can control our future instead of letting the future control us.
9 members of OPEC have raised the price of their crude oil.
No president has ever done more or worked harder to prepare this nation to face an energy crisis than he did. He left this country with a serious, substantive national energy policy.
By the time we finished 4 years in office, America was using 2 million barrels of oil a day less than on the day we took office.
President Carter set out to redefine America's role in the world. He established diplomatic relations with China, signed new Panama Canal treaties, and negotiated a new arms limitation treaty with the Soviet Union.
To this mountaintop tomorrow will come Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat to try to reach across the years of misunderstanding and hatred that have divided their peoples and find some common ground of understanding.
One of the most significant accomplishments of the Carter administration and President Carter personally was the Treaty of Peace between Israel and Egypt.
Carter came into the presidency convinced that we needed peace between Israel and her neighbors, and he wanted to lead in that effort. And he did it.
Peace has come to Israel and to Egypt.
Let there be no more war. Peace unto you. Shalom.
Since 1978, no Israeli has killed any Egyptian, and no Egyptian has killed any Israeli. And that's a significant record.
The U.S. Embassy in Tehran has been invaded and occupied by Iranian troops.
People was like, why didn't your husband do something? And so I would come home and say, why don't you do something? He would say, okay, what you want me to do? Bomb the harbor and then have them take out one hostage every day and put him in front of a firing squad?
He just resisted the pressure and did what he thought was right. We finally got every hostage home safely, and we did it without starting a war or using tactics that endangered the hostages.
He was the president that reversed the steady decline in American defense budgets with steady, real growth in real dollars every single year that he was in office.
30,000 Russian combat troops have crossed into Afghanistan.
In late 1979, in response to the invasion, President Carter increased defense spending faster still and persuaded European allies to do the same. To the Soviet Union, he issued a warning.
An attempt by any outside force to gain control of the Persian Gulf region will be regarded as an assault on the vital interests of the United States of America.
I thought that America should set the example for the whole world in protecting the very essence of human rights in every way.
President Carter also called on Roosevelt, his closest ally, to help spread his messages of human rights.
He came in one day and said, I'd like for you to go to Latin America for me. Would you be willing to do that? And I jumped at the chance. when we travel in the world now, Jimmy is treated with great respect, and I think it goes back to his human rights policy when he was in the White House. People know that he cared about them.
President Carter's legacy is peace with the world. And he left the presidency not only with peace, but with the respect and admiration of the majority of the citizens on this planet.
When I was involuntarily retired from the White House, 4 years earlier than I had anticipated. I wanted something else to occupy my time and to make my life interesting.
Million refugees.
I sat up in bed and said, I got an idea. We can have a little place in Atlanta, similar to Camp David, where people that have a conflict or a war ongoing or potential can come to us and we'll help negotiate a peace agreement. So that was the original thought.
And so the Carter Center was born. Its mission, waging peace, fighting disease, building hope. Much of the Carter Center's early work was aimed at ensuring free and fair elections around the world.
It is really exciting and wonderful to go and monitor an election. I remember when we went to Liberia, for instance, I decided to go down the line and ask them why they had stood in this misting rain all night. But when you'd say, and why are you going to vote? There's peace. And it does something to your soul, to be sure to be able to participate in something like that.
Conflict resolution goes hand in hand with nurturing the growth of democracy. The Carter Center and President Carter himself have played a central role in resolving bitter divisions between and within nations. It's a fundamental tenet of the Carter Center. Peace and freedom thrive most in communities free from chronic illness. Since 1982, the Carter Center has been fighting a war against infectious diseases around the world.
This is a magic net. About 3/4 of our total budget and 3/4 of our personnel are devoted to addressing so-called neglected tropical diseases.
We know that mental illness is a disease as any other. It can be diagnosed, it can be treated, and almost everyone suffering from mental illness can be helped.
Mrs. Carter's commitment to mental health issues, begun in the governor's mansion and continued in the White House, have also found a home in the Carter Center.
So she's become the world champion for mental health. If the Carter Center had not done anything except provide a foundation for Rosalind's mental health program, it would have been worthwhile.
Jimmy and Rosalind Carter have done more good things for more people in more places than any other couple on the face of the earth.
Jimmy Carter is this year's winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
My name's Jimmy. Jimmy and Sadia.
In the presidency, he got a sense of the fact that the world can be changed, and it doesn't take a government to change it. It can be changed one person at a time, one disease at a time, building one house at a time. He's led by something within, and he follows it wherever it leads. And it's not a matter of it being easy or successful. It just needs to be done. And if nobody else will do it, he'll try.
God gives us a capacity for choice. We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace. We can make these changes, and we must.
Carter.
I think it's incredible that it's taken this government so long to honor him.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I think the most dramatic moments of my use of the Oval Office came the last 2 or 3 days after when I coordinated from this office without leaving, as a matter of fact, even to go to bed at all, sitting on the couch, or sometimes lying down on the couch with telephones all around me, the release of the American hostages from Iran. Negotiating through intermediaries in Algiers, I coordinated the work of the Defense Department, the State Department forces, the Federal Reserve banking system, because $12 billion of Iranian assets were at stake. We had to work to the Bank of England, where $2 billion worth of gold was deposited that belonged to Iran. And there were 7 or 8 other nations involved. And from this point, here at the Oval Office, I negotiated finally and successfully the release of our hostages, all of whom, as you know, came home safe and free. I think that was probably the most dramatic moment of my life. When I finally got word, before I left my office as president, that the hostages were safe, that their release had been approved, that they were in an airplane on the end of the runway in Tehran, and that they would soon be leaving Iran and coming back home. So this is a place of history. It's a place of excitement. It's a place of hard work. It's a place of many very pleasant memories for me. Welcome to the Oval Office, where I served as president for 4 years. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever saw the Oval Office was after I was actually elected president. And I came here as a guest of then President Ford, who showed me around. The next time I came was after I'd been inaugurated. As we looked over the White House very quickly and then came down to the Oval Office, and I came in here, it was a very difficult thing for me to look at the Oval Office and to feel that it was actually mine, that I could maybe change something that was there. Just the arrangement of the sofas, the chairs, maybe even pull the window drapes. A lot of my friends would come to the Oval Office, outspoken friends from Georgia and otherwise. They would come in here and try to talk to me, and some of them were absolutely unable to speak. They were mute. They couldn't even say a word, and quite often they would forget what they came to see me about. And later would have to call back on the telephone and tell one of my staff members, this is why I came to Washington. Please give this message to the president. I think my most memorable part of this was probably
This
We discussed the tightness of the meeting commitment to carry out the anti-inflation program.
The president retires.
already had 4 different wars in 25 years in the Middle East. Every time the American worldwide nuclear forces had been placed on alert was a result of the combat in the Middle East. The Middle East is an area of a tremendous concentration of long-standing historic hatred, distrust, based on race, religion, and a fight over precious land. And these complicated issues had to be addressed in order to make sure we had peace not only in that region, but also that our country in the future wouldn't be faced with the prospect of a war in which we were directly involved.
Peace in the Middle East had eluded statesmen for nearly 30 years by the time Jimmy Carter took office. Tension in the region had again reached a crisis point by 1978. In July, President Carter decided on a bold stroke. He invited 2 historic enemies to sit down together at Camp David to negotiate peace. It would take all his skill in personal diplomacy to get an agreement between Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Menachem Begin of Israel.
Sadat kind of looked upon himself as a modern-day pharaoh, the leader of a nation, in fact, the leader of the entire Muslim world. He was bold, courageous, general in his approach, not given to concern about specific issues or details or semantics or the use of words. He saw things in strategic terms, and he wanted an overall settlement. He didn't want to leave to subordinates the responsibility of trying to conclude the more difficult and contentious issues. He was willing to address them himself. He came to Camp David looking for a comprehensive settlement. I think, if anything, Sadat trusted me too much. Begin was also a very strong and forceful and courageous political leader. He had been raised in an environment where he was the opposition, constantly condemning not only what the British did and what others did outside Israel, but even what the incumbent political leaders in Israel did themselves. He was thrust into the leadership and assumed it without reticence and with a great deal of gratification and enthusiasm. Begin was a semanticist. He liked to deal in words and minutiae, and whenever the pressures got on him, instead of retreating into strategic concepts and considerations, he retreated into details, and he liked to fiddle with words. Begin came to Camp David with the idea of just dealing in generalities and not with those very contentious and difficult specifics. He wanted to have a general statement of what we might do in the future, and then turn it over to his Secretary of State or Foreign Minister and his Defense Minister to conclude the agreements in the future. This obviously wouldn't work, and I think instead of trusting me too much, as was the case with Sadat, Begin probably didn't trust me quite enough.
After the first few days at Camp David, the differences separating Sadat and Begin seemed insurmountable. The 2 men refused to even sit down again at the same table. With the summit threatening to collapse, President Carter moved to overcome the impasse by developing his own peace plan. Day after day, he doggedly pursued an agreement. In the highly charged atmosphere, he continually challenged Sadat and Begin with fresh proposals and counter-proposals in an effort to hammer out a framework for peace.
The 13 days brought a steady, tedious, laborious, most often discouraging, incremental move toward agreement. The high spots, unfortunately, were those crisis moments when either Begin or Sadat announced that they were leaving, that they were giving up in hopelessness and animosity and disgust. And then I had to induce them to stay for a few more hours or maybe another day and give me a chance to find some common ground. On one occasion, when Begin was completely committed to leave, I carried some photographs of his grandchildren over, and I had found the name of all 8 grandchildren. I had written them on the photograph. Begin looked at them in a perfunctory way, and then he saw the name of his little children, whom he loved, and we started talking about our grandchildren and how the world might affect them adversely if we couldn't find peace. He changed his mind and decided to stay. On another occasion,
I was informed that Sadat had packed his bags, directed the Egyptian delegation to leave and call for a helicopter to go back to Egypt. I was distressed with this, and I went and visited Sadat in his cottage, closed the door, and we had one of the most intense human encounters that I have ever experienced. I told Sadat that if he did leave, he would be violating his word of honor to me, that he would not walk out, that it would destroy the relationships between him and me, which we both consider to be very valuable, and it would also damage the relations between our two countries and brand Sadat as the obstacle to peace. So he thought about it a while and said, we'll stay. And from then we began to make ever more progress. The restraint on Sadat was concern among his own Egyptian delegation that he was going too far, that he had made concessions in recognizing Israel that would not be accepted in the Arab world. But Sadat courageously said, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is peace.
On the 12th day, September 16, 1978, a final agreement was reached that would become the foundation for the future pursuit of peace in the Middle East. A prophet once said that peace is infinitely harder to make than war. Camp David was not an end, but a beginning.
The legacy of Camp David is still to be determined by historical events. 6 months after the Camp David Accords were signed with a great sense of euphoria and thanksgiving, the progress had in effect been aborted. There was no follow-up. We couldn't even get a treaty between Israel and Egypt. So perhaps I took our nation's prestige and my own political future in my hands and decided to go to Cairo and to Jerusalem to make one last-minute appeal to Begin and Sadat to conclude a peace treaty, and we will find this successful. That peace treaty has stood the test of time. The other part of the Camp David Accords have not been so successful because of various reasons. We've not been adequately successful in inducing Israel to withdraw from the West Bank, nor in granting to the Palestinians full autonomy as required of their basic human rights. But no matter what happens in the future, in the efforts to bring about peace, the basic premises of the Camp David Accords will have to be the foundation for progress to be expected in years to come.
our main goal is to try to keep open communication between the two sides, deter any potential violence, and make sure that the process is calm and transparent to help both sides accept the outcome, assuming that the process is indeed transparent and fair, and that all citizens have the right to participate.
Well, it's a bit like conducting an orchestra. There's a lot of different pieces that have to come together, right?
The overall goal is always to be a part of the whole process. Get a sense of the character of the
The Carter Center, as an NGO, had much more flexibility in terms of our ability to act and rely simply on moral authority. We're independent of the U.S. government, we do not represent the U.S. government, and that actually gives us an advantage.
File a delegation with short-term alternatives. Their job is essentially to travel around and to go from policy, record information on students and informing staff, training, effectively are all qualified voters able to control that are cast in secret and are most accurate.
Personal reputation going back to his time as president was a very positive reputation, as well as the Carter Center's reputation for integrity and honesty through his work in promoting democracy and peace.
This particular place is at 83% population. This is a very important area. And everything we've seen so far in Chicago is
Well, we wanted to go back to a village that had guinea worm and now has no more guinea worm. We'll never have another case of guinea worm in history. We stay in a hotel somewhere in the vicinity, and then we drive to and from the village, which is always good for us because we get to know a lot about the country.
When we arrived at this camp, the biggest room, it was just a great celebration. It was the dedication they had to getting rid of these diseases. And then what comes out of the tissue. So the aftermath is very similar to polio. People debilitates that knee, and sometimes the leg is crippled for the rest of one's life. And of course, these kids can't go to school. The pain is too great that they need medical care. And if it's an adult, they can't go to the field to plant the crops.
In every country where there's any like pandemic, it's so health, national human rights, that's the driving process. All of the countries are to assist those programs technically and financially so that the job can place to work. It's a very vast country. There is a dearth of infrastructure. And we have to work during the peak of the rainy season, which is when the inland transmission occurs. To use this as a tool to educate people about the fact that people aren't acidic water, and when they go out into the water, they ingest the sediments, and that's how they get famous. They seek the first time where they learn conflict.
Mrs. Carter was able to walk through doors that mortals can't usually get through.
We can help people with it by teaching them not to contaminate the water when they have these worms coming out. By helping them to learn how to filter the water to the plant. They're drinking and by putting a chemical in the water to kill parasites. Or by helping them to get safe drinking water from underground wells.
They used to have to walk in the dry season pools they had to dig. So now they have fresh clean water all the time. Now they're pretty
One of the countries that were originally endemic in England in 1986.
Most of us live on this type of strength. We have no freedom of speech, no freedom of assembly. They can't choose their own leaders except under contrived elections. So I pointed all that out in my speech. Afterwards, Castro came forward to me and he said, I have one request to make of you while you're in Cuba. He said, I want you and me to walk out on the baseball field with no security. I want the world to see that the former President of the United States is completely safe among 50,000 Cubans. And he asked me to throw out the first ball. I did. It was kind of a change-up. It was slow but a strike. And then later, he and I both signed a baseball. He gave it to me. And we, at one of our weekend fundraising events for the Carter Center, we auctioned it off. And it brought $160,000 because people from all over the nation bid on this unique baseball. We went to this village in Ethiopia just to see the nationwide program to eliminate trachoma, which is the #1 cause of preventable blindness. One of the things that we have learned is that if we have a program to get rid of the flies, it's a major factor in getting rid of trachoma. So one of the things that we did in Ethiopia was to start a program of developing privies, or outdoor toilets. We've now been responsible for the villages constructing almost 600,000 privies. So I have become known not as a Nobel laureate or not as a former president of the United States, but the #1 privy builder in the world.
This also shows how one public health thing can spread. It's so wonderful to go into these villages. This little girl was actually 4 years old. She went running over to show us husbandry. And she was going to show us how to use it. So she sat down and patted that little green dress all around and looked up with a smile that just does something to your heart. It was one of my best experiences.
What stands out most for me is the pride that I had in that the Nobel Peace Prize was given for the work of the Carter Center. We had 5,000 people there, many from Norway, but also a lot of our friends and neighbors came over, particularly contributors to the Carter Center that had financed the good work that we had done around the world. That's what made the Nobel ceremony so important and so gratifying and so much pleasure for me.
And I was proud of it because I thought he should have gotten it when Begin and Sadat got it for the Camp David peace treaty.
We will not learn how to live together in peace by killing each other's children.
And there's no sweet song keeps Georgia on.
We're very proud of Willie Nelson. I used to run with Willie Nelson. I've been on the stage and sang with Willie Nelson 5 or 6 times. I would say that even among the Norwegians, of all the wonderful performers that participated that evening, that Willie Nelson was still the favorite.
Guinea worm is a nasty parasite. It is something you get from drinking contaminated water. When you swallow the water, the guinea worm will then live inside of your body for about a year. Once there is a blister on the skin and that ruptures, the worm will emerge. It's very painful. If the patient enters water, the worm will then release fluid, and inside that fluid are thousands of guinea worm larvae. Once they are in the water, they are eaten by a water flea or a cyclops. It is then the cyclops that you drink, and then the cycle begins again.
The problem is that this is still a very dry area, and they get water when they can out of a deep well or borehole. But when those water supplies dry up, the people go to the ancient ponds and they dip up the water and drink it, and it has within it guinea worm eggs, and then a year later they have guinea worms coming out of their bodies. If the worm comes out at a joint, say in your knee, it swells up and destroys the tissue. So the aftermath is very similar to polio. It completely debilitates that knee, and sometimes the leg is crippled for the rest of one's life. And of course, these kids can't go to school. The pain is too great and they need medical care. And if it's an adult, they can't go into the field to plant their crops.
It's just tragic to see all these children walking around still with guinea worm in this day and age when it can be prevented.
In every country where guinea worm is endemic, it is the Ministry of Health and the National Guinea Worm Eradication Program that's the driving process. The role of the Carter Center is to assist those programs technically and financially so that the job can get done.
The Carter Center is an indispensable partner.
Southern Sudan is the most difficult place to work. It is a very vast country. There is a dearth of infrastructure, and we have to work during the peak of the rainy season, which is when the guinea worm transmission occurs.
You use this as a tool to educate people about the fact that guinea worm is in their water, and when they don't filter the water, they ingest these animals, and that's how they get infected.
They see for the first time where guinea worm is and where it comes from.
Guinea worm is an indicator of the level of poverty or where there is poverty. And we use guinea worm as an entry point when we're trying to address poverty and development issues.
And this area reported more guinea worm than any other area in all of eastern Equatoria. So we're trying to hit it as hard as possible. When the guinea worm emerges, we have to catch it within 24 hours, and we have to bandage it within 24 hours, and that can't happen without village volunteers. It's a huge challenge.
But we can help people prevent it by teaching them not to contaminate the water when they have these worms coming out of their body, by helping them to learn how to filter their water through a finely woven cloth, their drinking water, and by putting a chemical in the water to kill the parasite in the water, or by helping them to get safe drinking water from underground wells.
This has made a huge difference in this community. They used to have to walk in the dry season to pools they had to dig. So now they have fresh, clean water all the time, which is, now they're free of guinea worm.
The 20 countries that were originally endemic at the beginning of the campaign in 1986, most have eradicated the disease. Only Sudan, Ghana, and Mali remain endemic.
Wategully is one of the villages in the heavily endemic guinea worm area that has completely eradicated guinea worm by taking the advice that we have brought to them and the help that the Carter Center and many others have provided. And this proves that it's completely possible to eliminate guinea worm completely. And when you don't have guinea worm, then the children can go to school, the farmers can plant their crops, and the entire economic status of a village and a community and a nation can be helped.
Parenting, very simply, is ensuring.
Here's the
There are 6 billion faces on Earth, some full of hope and dreams, others empty with despair, constrained by barriers that keep them from healthy and productive lives. The Carter Center works to tear down those barriers and create a world where everyone has a chance to live in peace and enjoy basic human rights. The Carter Center has worked in over 70 countries to advance peace and fight devastating diseases, The center's staff of over 150 people work in many of the poorest regions of the world. The Carter Center was created as a place where people could resolve conflicts, like at Camp David. Over the years, the center has helped improve relations among nations and has opened the doors to peace. The center has observed over 90 elections in 37 countries, including Indonesia, Liberia, and Panama. As a result, leaders are held accountable to the people in countries that have never had free and fair elections. The Carter Center is a leader in fighting neglected diseases. Diseases like guinea worm, river blindness, trachoma, and lymphatic filariasis. These are gone from the developed world, but they still afflict some of the poorest people on earth.
The promising thing is that these diseases are all preventable because we've proven that in the rich world. If the folks are just given a chance to know what they can do to improve their own lives, then they can transform their own lives into an opportunity for hope and self-respect and anticipation of a better future.
The people of the Carter Center work for peace, fight disease, and most importantly, bring hope to those who never had it before.
We are willing to take a chance that we might fail if we believe that the ultimate goal is worthwhile, worth our effort, and worth an investment in people who have been neglected by others.
We were the poorest, most isolated people in the world. And I think often if we weren't there would be nobody to help them.
The Carter Center works where the need is greatest to improve the lives of the poor, the disadvantaged, and those who have no voice. The center's accomplishments are a fitting tribute to its founders.
There are literally hundreds of millions of people whose lives have been changed by what the Carter Center has done, plus many others who have benefited from the proof that we have provided to other agencies that they can do the same thing.
Building hope is what we do at the Carter Center.